we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to this presentation called Navigating the New Normal, Coping with COVID-19. I first just want to introduce the two of us who are running this presentation from the Counseling Center. My name is Catherine Klein, and I'm a current doctoral intern at University of Maryland's Counseling Center. The other person who is helping me is one of the staff psychologists at the Counseling Center, Dr. Michelle Farrell, who will be helping with all the background stuff, which I will fill you in on in just 1 minute. So one thing to know is that this presentation is being recorded so that we can use it in other settings if need be, which is why your screens will be hidden the entire time to keep confidentiality. And the other thing to note about this presentation is it is a skill building presentation, not a therapy session, which is the other main thing that we do at the Counseling Center at University of Maryland. So it's skill building in that we hope after this, you can take away specific strategies to help you cope with everything that's going on. It could be helpful to you to have a pen and paper available as you write down and reflect on some things throughout, and to write down specific strategies that you feel will be useful to you. And also at the end of this presentation, we're going to spend some time writing your specific individualized coping plan that you can take away and apply to life. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the chat to Michelle, not to everyone. So if you type in the chat box, there's a function that you can select to a direct person or to everyone. Again, make sure that when you type questions, please send them to Michelle Farrell, and they will help you answer those questions as they can. And even at the end, we might have time to address some questions that are posed in the chat. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I might be frozen. There we go. Okay. So first, I want you to engage in a brief reflection. So you can close your eyes if you'd like. For some people, that's helpful. First, I want you to reflect on a typical day before COVID-19 hit. So think back to that. Think back to one of those days. What was your morning routine like? What did you have to plan for? Who did you get to see during your morning routine? How did you get to school, to class, to work? Where were you able to go work, take class? And how about the middle of the day? How did you spend your lunchtime? Did you meet up with friends? Did you walk to Stamp? Figure out what you were feeling to eat that day? And then in the afternoon, evening, did you get to work out at a certain place, have dinner with people, go to your clubs, your activities at various locations? So now think to a day now. What is your morning routine like now? Are you living in a different place, in a different location, with different things to navigate? Where is work/school for you? What are the things that you might be missing out on now in your afternoon, evening routine? Like attending your favorite club meeting or not being able to have your favorite gym workout. So I do this reflection to show you all and to reflect on how many changes you have had to navigate between then and now. And all of the experiences you've lost from then till now. When we reflect on this, we see how much is being asked of us these days. And it's really important to recognize that it is quote unquote normal and expected to be struggling right now, because we are all facing significant stress, anguish, anxiety, and nearly all aspects of life have changed in some way, shape, or form. So yes, it's normal that you are experiencing intense stress right now. So first, to recognize how expected that is. Getting into how we react. How we react when we are under such significantly stressful situations that we have never encountered before. And so first, we're going to look at our reactions to these things. And one thing to note that's really important is that reactions to difficult experiences are individualized, meaning that your reaction to COVID-19 could look very different than your friend or your family member's reaction. And our reactions are placed into these 4 different categories of emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and physiological reactions. So thinking of what emotional reactions might look like. So these are the feelings we're having. They could be sadness, numbness, anger, worry, a number of things, emotional feelings, reactions to this COVID-19 pandemic. You also could be noticing that your emotional reactions might be more intense right now, or they might have a longer duration, meaning they're lasting longer. Our cognitive reactions are what our thoughts are, what crosses our mind in response to the pandemic. So these cognitive reactions could include things like racing thoughts, rumination, meaning getting stuck on a specific thought, not being able to let it go, or intrusive thoughts, meaning not having control over thoughts entering our mind. Another category of reactions is behavioral. So in response to this situation, you may notice some behavioral reactions that feel like a shift than your typical reactions. So behavioral reactions might include isolating yourself, crying more frequently, fighting more frequently with friends, romantic partners, family members. And lastly, physiological reactions. These include reactions that occur in our body. Examples might be more body aches and pain, more headaches, difficulty sleeping, increased or decreased appetite. So take a minute right now, and you may have already started this, but take a minute to think about, how have you reacted to the stress of COVID-19? What emotions have you noticed in yourself? Do you have racing thoughts? Are you ruminating? Behaviorally, are you crying more often? Are you fighting more often? And physiologically, is your sleep messed up? Is your appetite messed up? Do you have more body aches or headaches? And the reason I'm having you reflect on what your reactions are is because this is the first step in making a plan to cope with what is going on. If we raise awareness to our reactions, that gives us space to make mindful and helpful choices for coping. It also helps you create a sort of alarm system for yourself so that you can recognize, oh, I might need to incorporate some strategies here. Oh, I might need to change something about this situation here. So it's really important to keep practicing raising that awareness to these reactions you're having. Today, we will be learning about how to engage in what we call active coping. We call it active rather than passive coping, because passive coping, it includes things like avoiding, ignoring, or escaping the realities of right now. For example, we can temporarily ignore our emotions in this situation, but eventually they're going to catch up with us. Or we can escape through drinking alcohol or using other substances, but again, the stress will catch up with us. It's more helpful to engage in active coping, which essentially means to proactively implement strategies to the stress that we are facing. And active coping involves a three-pronged approach. The first category of active coping is proactive self-care, which is essentially daily incorporations to buffer the stress we are facing. The second prong of active coping is altering the amount of stress we face. This includes investigating your life stressors and seeing where you might actually be able to make some change in the amount of stress you have. And the third prong of active coping is to react differently. This includes ways we can respond to stress that actually help alleviate the suffering rather than amplifying the suffering. So today we're going to go into these 3 prongs and talk specifically about how you can utilize and engage in each one of these areas of active coping. So first, self-care. Again, proactive self-care are things to incorporate in your everyday life. And I want you to think of proactive self-care as armor around yourself, armor that helps protect and shield you from the stress you're facing from COVID-19. If you can envision this armor you have around yourself, you can see that by engaging in proactive self-care, you toughen up that armor so that the arrows or the weapons of stress don't penetrate as deeply or don't harm you as much. So, what is proactive self-care? What are these things we can do that help build that protective armor? First, I want to review what I call the basics. And you may have heard of this throughout your life, but it's always important to revisit it, especially in stressful times. So the basics include sleep, exercise, and nutrition. First, let's take a look at sleep. So one thing that I've heard so many people say, and myself included, is how much sleep has taken a hit since this pandemic has occurred. So what can we do to try to improve the quality of our sleep, trying to improve this self-care strategy? So sleep hygiene stuff. You may know that you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. But in terms of how you can improve the quality or make it so that you're actually able to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, include some of the following things. So first, it's really helpful to have a sleep-wake schedule, meaning that we want to try to sleep and wake at the same times each day. Now, this is really hard, and I remember this being even harder as a college student. But the more you can work towards that schedule, the easier it's going to be to get those 7 to 8 hours. Also, it can be really useful to have a bedtime routine to start signaling to our brain that it's time to sleep. So this really includes anything from dimming the lights to maybe lighting a candle or listening to relaxing music or disengaging from the world. Things, again, to signal I'm getting ready to sleep. Another thing that is, again, incredibly difficult for all of us in this day and age is to limit our screen time before bed. I am 100% guilty of not being able to put down my phone a few hours before bed, sometimes even minutes before I'm trying to sleep. But unfortunately, the blue light that's emitted through our phones and our TVs signal to our brains that it's time to stay awake. So again, the amount that you can limit your screen time before bed will be incredibly helpful to you, not just for falling asleep, but for having better quality sleep throughout the night. This same thing goes with turning off the lights before bed. And this last sleep strategy that can be really useful is if you're finding yourself unable to sleep, your mind is racing, you're lying in bed thinking, oh no, I have only X amount of hours to sleep, or oh no, that thing that I need to do tomorrow, whatever it is, and you can't sleep, it's really important to get out of bed. The reason we want to get out of bed when we're tossing and turning is if we stay in bed and we're not sleeping, our brains start to associate our beds with not sleeping, with staying awake. So get out of bed, keep the lights dim, don't go on your phones or don't turn on the TV, but do something else without lights, like a puzzle, like drawing, like reading a book that makes you sleepy. And only go back to bed when you are tired and ready to sleep. So the next basic is movement/exercise. Exercise can actually operate like an antidepressant, and it has immediate and long-term benefits. The immediate benefits, if you've experienced this, that high that you get after a good sweat, and the long-term benefits go on, from improved concentration to better mood over time, a number of things. But right now, it's really hard to find movement exercise time, especially as we're mourning things that we love to do. Like maybe you were signed up for tennis lessons in the spring and you can't do that anymore. Or maybe you found a yoga studio that you loved that you can't go to anymore. I understand the loss of all this. And it's incredibly important to adjust how you can incorporate movement and exercise into your life right now. It's going to really help that armor that we talked about. So 2 things here. Make it enjoyable. Don't do something you hate. I hate running, so I will never go running. Do something you like. And second, try to buddy up with somebody. Have a friend who, wants to do that yoga video with you on Zoom, or a friend who, wants to challenge you to, I've seen some plank challenges rolling around lately. So the third basic is nutrition and hydration. The things to know about this are it's really important to avoid extremes when it comes to nutrition, meaning if you're only eating and you're obsessed about eating super healthy foods, you're going to bounce back to wanting the sugary, not so healthy foods. So make sure you're not on the other end with only eating the delicious stuff that we love, like donuts and cakes, and you can see what I like, but making sure you get in proper nutrition, making sure you're hydrating, drinking water, and finally limiting your alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, and other substances. Some more proactive self-care, again, trying to build that armor so that stress doesn't penetrate through as easily. And these are things that are specific to COVID-19. So first, try to stick to a routine. Routines can help us feel more clear-headed, organized, and in control. And we all know how out of control we feel. So try to build what your morning looks like, what your work time looks like, what your evening looks like. Self-care incorporated into that. Trying to work at the same times rather than different times each day. Or I've also heard students talk about how helpful it's been to ensure or continue the work times that they had in place before online classes to now sticking to those now. Again, I know that routine is incredibly hard right now, but it can be really useful. Second, set boundaries for work and school. For some of us, there is no physical boundary between work and school and home right now. think about how you can carve out workspace and work times to the extent that you can. So if you have the privilege of having a space that can be your self-care space, like a bedroom, and a different space in your home that could be dedicated to work time, try that. The boundaries between work/school and home/comfort/self-care can really help us mentally separate the two of these things so that we can recharge and decrease the risk of burnout. The last two things are mastery and pleasure activities. So mastery activities include things that help make you feel accomplished. This is very individualized for people. So, for example, you might feel really skilled at being a chef. And if that is the skill you had, I wish that you were quarantining with me, because that is not my skill or my partner's skill. But the point of this is to not forget about doing activities that make you feel like a pro in some way, that make you feel a sense of, hey, I'm pretty darn good at this. It can really help our stress levels to feel competent and skilled. And last, pleasure activities. What brings you joy? Make sure you are incorporating this into your everyday life. Again, feeling positive emotions that we get from these pleasure, joy activities can really help buffer our stress. The last thing I want to say about proactive self-care and building this armor for yourself is that it tends to have a snowball effect, meaning that if you start to engage in some of these things, it will help build the stamina to continue building more of the proactive self-care. The second prong of active coping is altering the amount of stress you face. I'm imagining that you all are hearing this and looking like this meme on the left right here. And I totally get that it is extremely difficult right now to change the amount of stress that you face. But here is what I mean by altering the amount of stress if and when possible. So here are some questions that you can reflect on. In what situations am I feeling high stress? For me, I was noticing intense high stress levels during morning and around dinner time. And as I reflected on what that might be about, I recognized that a lot of it had to do with the news that I was listening to and watching too much. So, recognizing my high stress situation and seeing what it could be linked to, I was able to make adjustments in the amount of news watching that I was engaging in. This is one example. Another question to ask yourself, what is causing me significant worry? And what worries of those do I have control over? A common example I'm hearing right now for students is that grades are incredibly stressful right now. It is so hard to shift to learning completely online. An example of how a student can alter this is considering the pass-fail option that's now been given to students. So that if you decide on the pass-fail, you don't have to worry as much about the quality of work you're producing. And the last question, which goes with these first two, is where can I make adjustments or changes? Can I make adjustments or changes to any of these situations? So again, I know this is so hard to think about. How in the heck can I possibly change the amount of stress that is on my plate? But I challenge you to reflect on those high stress scenarios, those things causing you significant worry, and seeing where you might be able to shift or change just a little bit. And going into our third prong of active coping. This third prong is reacting to stress differently. And it involves two categories within reactions to stress, reacting differently. The first is mindset, which we'll first cover. And the second is specific strategies that you can incorporate as reactions to stress. But sticking with the mindset of reacting to stress differently. One thing before I go into these is to know that we need to practice these mindsets over and over so that we can make them habits. Or in other words, they come more naturally without needing to think about it, the more that we are intentional in practicing them. The first is acceptance leads to less suffering. Fighting the realities of this situation will only make us more frustrated, upset, angry. When we accept the realities of COVID-19, we open up mental space and time to engage in all of this active coping. I've noted these questions prior in the presentation, but what can't I control versus what can I control? The stuff you can't control, let it go, or accept that these are the limitations right now so that you can focus on where you actually can make changes. Acceptance can be really difficult because for some, it can feel like giving up. Facing this reality and not wasting emotional energy or time fighting things. What I mean is, when we face this reality, we're not wasting emotional energy or time fighting the things that are out of control. Again, try to accept what you cannot change. Second, practice self-compassion. When you're having stress reactions that are upsetting, so for example, fighting with others more, panic attacks, experiencing more intense and longer lasting negative emotions, be kind to yourself. You are trying to survive a pandemic. It's incredibly important to just allow yourself to see whatever negative reaction is coming up and to not beat yourself up about it. Because the more that you beat yourself up about whatever those stress reactions are, the less able you're going to feel to implement these other coping strategies that we're talking about. So third, see all sides of this situation. What good, if any, can be taken from this? And again, you may be rolling your eyes right now, and I understand why you would be. But one thing that we've learned in psychology is that tragic or traumatic events can bring new meaning or perspective to our lives. So, for example, in this COVID-19 pandemic time, are you taking time to recognize how fortunate you are to have the things you do have? For example, shelter, food, maybe good health care? Are you reevaluating your priorities? What do you really want from this life? Do you want to work less? Maybe not. Maybe work brings you a ton of meaning. But reevaluating your priorities to what makes your life most meaningful. Are you holding your loved ones more tightly if you have the privilege to be quarantining with somebody you love? And this last question I've gotten a lot out of. What has this new life brought you that your old life couldn't? For me, I recognized that I was so busy prior to this pandemic that it was really taking a toll on my mental health and caring for myself. And I recognized that being less busy and having less things to do meant I get more time that I need to recharge. So again, what has this new life brought that your old life couldn't? And last mindset here is it is easier to control yourself than others. Focus on you. It can be so frustrating to see others not following CDC guidelines or to see others engaging in self-destructive behaviors during this time. But remember, you cannot control them. Put your energy into being a role model for altruism and a role model for active coping. People really do learn and take from seeing people model the good stuff. So again, focus on you. And the second part of reacting to stress differently involves specific strategies that you can use as reactions to stress. And again, I want to stress the importance of engaging in these intentionally over time in order to make them habits. If we make them habits, they'll take less energy to kind of put into our life. And all of these are really useful. So the first is journaling. As I mentioned in the reflection, we have lost so much during this time. And truly, we're in a grieving process. It can be incredibly healing to put words to those losses. And I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard of Pennebaker, who is this researcher who looks at how journaling and writing about difficult experiences, what impact that has on mental health. But there is a ton of research showing the effects of the healing power of writing. Some ideas for journaling, in addition to talking about what you've lost, talking about your pain, but also some other more positive things, like naming your personal strengths during this time, naming the things that you're incredibly grateful for. Both of those, naming personal strengths and naming what we're grateful for, can have an immediate impact on positive mood. Second includes grounding exercises. So this is when we're finding ourselves having an anxiety attack, feeling like our minds are racing, feeling kind of taken away by the thoughts, the emotions that we're experiencing. So this first one is 5 senses, what 5 senses can do is, again, bring you back to the present, ground you back to the here and now. And it's noting 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch or feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So going through those 5 senses and bringing you to the here and now can bring you back down from all of that carrying away feelings and thoughts. Another grounding exercise is progressive muscle relaxation, which is essentially taking one part of your body, like your hand, for example. You can do this as I describe it, and tensing it up for 10 to 20 seconds, maybe even 30. After that time, tensing it as much as you can, progressively letting the tension go from your hand. And you can do this with different parts of your body. You can do a body scan with progressive muscle relaxation. And again, it can really help you bring yourself down to the present moment. The third specific strategy includes breathing exercises. So diaphragmatic breathing is one of them. And it involves sitting in a comfortable position on the floor, on your bed, or whatever comfortable flat surface, relaxing your shoulders, and putting one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. Breathing in through your nose for 2 seconds. You should experience here the air moving through your nostrils and into your abdomen, making your stomach expand and the hand on your stomach to go up. And during this type of diaphragmatic breathing, make sure your stomach is the thing that's moving outward and that your chest remains relatively still. This can really help increase the strength of your ability to breathe and relax you. And last, 4-7-8 breathing, which is inhaling through your nose for 4 seconds, holding for 7 seconds, and exhaling through your mouth for 8 seconds. So again, inhaling for 4, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8. This breathing technique really calms you and grounds you if you're struggling with anxiety in the moment. Also, just to note, these breathing exercises can be really useful to not just incorporate as reactions to stress, but incorporating them as everyday practices that can help you. And finally, which you may have heard this over and over, but it can't stress it enough, connecting with others. Getting validation from people, being a support system to people, remembering how we are there for one another. So when you're having those stressful reactions, talking about it with someone. So we'll take about 2 minutes here. Here is where your pen and paper will be useful. And I want you to write down your personalized coping plan. Again, remember that these 3 prongs of active coping are really important for different reasons. So with proactive self-care, what are you going to try for sleep to help improve the quality? For exercise, what are you going to commit to make sure you're moving your body? What work boundary can you set? Is it a space in your home? Is it a time that you will not work after X time? And what mastery and pleasure activity can you start engaging in routinely? And second, altering the amount of stress you face. I really encourage you to reflect on these three categories: work and school, relationships, and everyday life. To reflect on them and see where might you be able to make some changes so that you're facing just a little less stress from each of them. We reviewed the work-school example with the pass-fail option. With relationships, it might be limiting the conversation you have about COVID-19. It might be taking a break from a relationship that is causing you more stress. Setting a boundary with that person and explaining why you're setting that boundary. With everyday life, it can be anything from, if you are stressed about the fact that your work time is in the morning and you're not a morning person, change that routine. Alter the amount of stress you're facing. And then with your reactions to stress differently, think about what 2 mindset practices. So again, those were acceptance, self-compassion, seeing all sides of the situation. That is what good can be taken from this. And focusing on you, not trying to control others. Which 2 mindset practices are you willing to start routinely incorporating? And lastly, what 2 specific strategies come up for you as ways that might be helpful in responding to stress in a more healthy way? Those were journaling, the grounding exercises of the 5 senses or progressive muscle relaxation, the breathing exercises of breathing through your belly rather than your chest, or the 4-7-8 breathing. And one thing to know is you can Google any of these exercises if you want to return and you can't remember quite what they were. You can find them online. Lastly, I just want to mention what counseling center services are available right now. We do have individual appointments for both in-state and out-of-state students, but for legal purposes, we have needed to separate what we can provide to in-state versus out-of-state students, faculty, and staff now. So for in-state, you can call the counseling center as you normally would, schedule an intake, and your intake counselor will help you decide what the best next steps for you might be. We're providing brief individual therapy over Zoom, and we're also still providing referrals, meaning helping you connect with a therapist that is not in our center, who you wouldn't have a time limit with, a session limit with. And for out-of-state folks, we are providing phone consultations, which can help you, again, decide next best steps. So that might be a referral for a therapist in your area, or other things. And we're also giving other mental health workshops like this one. Breathe, stretch, shake, let it go. I love the title because it's from a P. Diddy song. And that's on Mondays from 1 to 2. Healthy communication and relationships is on Mondays from 10 to 11. And time management is on Fridays from 10 to 11. They're happening for the next 2 weeks, but please stay tuned on our website for more mental health workshops that we might be offering beyond the next 2 weeks. And I want to call your attention to this link right here. This is our counseling center website, counseling.umd.edu, but /COVID-19/ includes more coping resources. So we actually don't have a ton of time for questions. I hope you were able to send those that you had to Michelle in the chat, but maybe I could take one if there is one available. And if not, I will, for the last 3 minutes, just let you continue to work on your coping plan for COVID-19. One resource that Michelle just mentioned that might be useful is it's useful for outlining the grounding and the meditation exercises that were referenced, is www.mindful.org. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, wrapping up here. Thank you all so much for attending this presentation, and I really hope you got even one thing out of it that you can start incorporating into your life and hopefully making all of this a little more bearable. Take care.